Hello and welcome. My name is Guru Pathik, and today we're going to be reviewing a 3.7k Invoker. The message I got from Raycon8 was, "Hi there, I saw your guide on Quap Mid and went through some of your YouTube videos for replay analysis. I was hoping you could help me out with this one." He gives me the game ID, and his solo MMR is 3.7k, though this was a party game, and his party MMR is 4k. So he plays a lot of party games, and he seems to play pretty well in parties. I was the Invoker this game, and I got dumpstered by an SF mid. I think he was also probably a solo 5k. Any tips? So it feels like you feel like you were overmatched by someone in terms of skill in your lane, and he's not a solo 5k. I checked out the profile of the Shadow Fiend player before this game, and he's 4.7. So he is considerably higher than you, but you can still play even in this lane. So we'll go through this replay, see what you did well, what you did poorly, and how you can improve. Invoker is a pretty tough hero to lane because he has no flash farm mechanic, which means that he must win the lane through last hitting and positioning, and that's very, very difficult for it's very difficult if you start to fall behind and you're in a laning situation like that. Though I do like that you're playing Invoker. So first things first, we'll talk about opening item builds. You'll like to go for null tally as well as tangos, and I think that's okay. One issue I have with this is that you really want the GG branches, and the reason you do, especially in the mid lane on a hero like Invoker, is that your base damage is terrible. Your base damage starts at 38, and then with the null tally you get +9, so now you're sitting at 47, which is really, really low, and those 2 GG branches is an extra 2 damage, and it doesn't sound like much, but when you're comparing your base damage to SF's base damage, for instance, right? He went Wraithband and then 2 GG branches as well, and currently you're behind in base damage because his range is 43 to 52 or 46 to 52, and then I'm going to go back because I want to see this rune fight, and then yours is 44 to 50. So you're basically giving up 2 base damage to Shadow Fiend, and in the mid lane, especially on a hero like Invoker, where last hitting is the most important thing that you can do as an Invoker, that extra 2 damage is a big, big deal. Now, what you'll see a lot of times with Invokers is sometimes they'll start with a Blade of Attack early, and the reason for that is to sort of counter his low base damage. So if I go back, sorry, I have to let it play to look at the shop. But the idea with that is that a Blade of Attack gives 9 damage, and while it doesn't give as much stats as Null Tally does, it allows you to build into Fade's Boots earlier. And what you get is when you build a Blade of Attack, and then you get like 2 GG branches, for example, and you get pooled 2 tangos, you're allowed to finish your phase boots, which gives you like a +6 damage bonus the instant you finish your phase boots, because Blades of Attack is +9 damage, the second Blades of Attack is +9 damage, and then the phase boots completion turns it into +24 damage instead of +18, so you get like a +6 bonus with the upgrade. And a lot of the times versus heroes with high base damage on Invoker, I start thinking about building phase boots early, so I might have even considered Blade of Attack with 2 GG branches to start out, just to help alleviate that base damage issue. And we'll see what build you end up going for. Exhort is something I like versus Shadow Fiend, but you can play any style versus him. I just think Quaswex is much more difficult. So you rally up your troops. It looks like you've got 2 bottom and you've got 3 top. And this is kind of like a strategy for taking the rune. That's basically, we're not going to contest wherever they send most of their guys, but we're going to get the other rune. And that's a fine strategy. This is the kind of split you're looking for this. If you've got an Alk on your team, for example, usually you want to contest a rune and take that rune, so like all 5 heroes will go to that one rune. This is very much a, let's see where they show up and take the other rune kind of thing. So they show up, Shadow Fiend, Slark, Wisp, and Skywrath. So this is pretty scary. They don't have the best level 1. Wisp is okay at level 1. It's really nice for the movement speed, giving it to someone else. Undying is also very good, but it looks like Undying is bottom. And you're only 3 right here with a pretty weak level 1. Invoker is very weak. So I think you give up this one and hope that your team gets bottom. It kind of sucks for you. Undying ends up taking bottom rune. So you kind of lost the 2v1 down there to the Undying, and that's unfortunate, but that's just kind of how things go sometime. So here you kind of mess up your block a little bit. Having a good block versus Shadow Fiend is really important because you want to be able to apply pressure on him through right clicks. But here you haven't skilled anything yet. Now you go exhort. So you skill exhort a little bit late. I like that you're pulling the wave here. He does a nice kind of like pre-deny on you there. You didn't contest that last hit. You get denied there. Okay, so first wave has gone down. You've gotten 2 last hits, and then of the 3 possible denies, you've missed 3. And I'm going to really kind of harp on your laning here, because this is almost the most important part of the game for the Invoker. And we're going to actually do this at half speed. So here, you pull this wave, which is fine, and then you end up last hitting this creep, which is good. You pulled it closer to you, so it actually increased the length for his auto attack. Then here, you don't actually contest this deny. And I don't know if you're having trouble clicking on it, but this was an easy deny you could have had if you just contested it. Orbs look funky now because of the replay. You're standing really close to your wave, which is okay based on Shadow Fiend's positioning because he's a little far away to hit you. But if he walks up and like right clicks you right here, what's going to happen is he's going to aggro these creeps. And if you like try to fight back, you're going to actually aggro these creeps. But since these creeps are closer to you than these creeps are closer to Shadow Fiend, he can actually get a free right click off on you based on where you're standing right now. So I'd like to see your positioning just a little bit further back, maybe a little bit more on your hill. You end up pulling aggro again. He's setting up to go for this deny. And like you retreated too far here. Right? When you're retreating up your hill, he's going to have difficulty seeing you, so I'd rather just you sit here. As well as if he walks into range, you can choose to right-click him or choose to go for the last hit. You end up not getting the attack off in time because you were retreating too long, maybe not expecting him to go for that deny. And then here it's like a farm trade. He takes this last hit and you take this last hit, which is okay. He probably could have contested this one, but it's a little risky. And then here you can't see him. And I think you just didn't attack that one early enough. Like I think if you attacked that creep, like right here, you should send your attack. So this is like an idea with last hitting. Instead of watching health bars and then whenever the health bar drops into range, you should be watching your creep's attack animations. And creeps deal different amounts of damage. So the range creep actually does more damage than the melee creep, even though if you click on them, they say they do the same damage. It's because they do different damage types. And your goal right now as this Invoker is going to be to throw your auto attack so that your auto attack sort of follows this guy's in the air. Like, do you see his auto attack? The second that lands, or the instant that lands, this is going to be available to be last hit, which means you want your auto attack to be right here, following right behind the range creep's auto attack, instead of waiting until this bar drops into range to try and throw your auto attack. Because you wait and then you click, or you're like, this last hit is now available, it's too late. So this Shadow Fiend is keying on attack animations, whereas you're keying on health bars. And to progress as a Dota player, especially in contested last hitting against better players, you're going to have to anticipate better. And what that means is by watching these guys' attack animations. You see what I mean? He's just a little closer to you. So maybe he's not even keying on it. Because this one, like, you barely beat you to it. But these are like small laning things, and I could do this for the entire duration of your opening laning phase. But what you want to be is you want to make every motion that you matter in the early game important. And so what I recommend for you is I recommend for you to just watch this game again and watch it at half speed, watch it at a quarter speed, and talk about every single motion that you make and whether or not it was worth it. This is one of the hardest parts of the game because it moves so fast and you have to be extremely precise to beat the best laners in the world, and is honestly probably the place that players can grow the most if they take the time to slow it down and do this kind of thing. But it's very, very tough to say, or it's very, very tough to do, and then it's tough to perfect as well because you've got to learn to think that quickly as well. So I'll stop with that kind of thing, but that's the kind of analytical view you want to take at your laning phase to sort of improve your last hits. You elect to go for 1 point in Quas, 1 point in Exhort, which is kind of like an old school build, I would say. Invoker in the past used to dominate the mid lane through his regen on Quas that other heroes didn't have, but that was back when there was one rune and bottle crowing wasn't as prominent. So I think I would rather just take the Invoke and get Sunstrike, as it sets you up maybe to get kills. Here you're just not contesting him at all in lane. You're just kind of letting him do whatever he wants. Right, you're standing in the river, you're a bit scared, but you're not even trying for these last hits. Like, you could have last hit that guy, you end up getting this one. But you're just kind of standing in the river, not doing much. And we'll put up last hits for now. Like, you could have contested that one if you wanted to. These are all positioning things, right? You have to anticipate and then be in the correct position. Another thing versus Shadow Fiend is, this is just, and this is true of any hero who has a nuke in the mid lane, which most of them do. You don't want to be standing next to creeps ever, right? This is poor positioning by you. And you walked up a little bit closer to try to get this last hit, which is okay, but instead of walking up closer to get these last hits, you should be anticipating to get that range creep better and then doing it from range. Right? So we'll watch this once again and I'll talk about what I wanted you to do. So here you get this last hit, which is good. So attack, walk here, attack. You move the camera a bit. Because you needed 2 attacks to get that one down. The reason I say this, like, leveling up Quas at level 2 is a little bit old school is that you don't have time to sit on Quas very much anymore. That was back in the day when Invoker had really, really good base damage, and so he could afford to sit on Quas and still reliably last hit. But nowadays, like, you can't reasonably do that. And so most Invokers, what they elect to do is they elect to just have more points in Exhort early on, and then just send out a salve or something. Because if you're on Exhort and it gains you 3 or 4 last hits, and you send out a salve, that's better than being on Quas and missing out on those 3 or 4 last hits. And here, like, you even forego Invoke again at level 3. I kind of disagree with you walking for this regen rune bottom. So if we look at the value you got from the regen, right, you're gaining like 200 life, which you really kind of don't need at this point, at the expense of giving Shadow Fiend a full wave of farm. And you're missing 2 creeps worth of experience as well as 3 creeps worth of farm. I just don't think that's worth it. If it's a bounty rune, then it's kind of like a trade. It's like a, I would say, a bad trade. But I just, I would much rather see you contesting the lane. Like, Invoker's not someone who likes to leave the lane, and if you are leaving the lane, then make sure you're not missing anything. So here you right click him, which is okay. It's kind of tricky to right click him at this point, especially if you look at his items. I guess he went boots first. He may have his bottle on the courier. I have to switch off player perspective to use my hotkeys. Yeah, he's got his bottle on the courier. So, kind of tricky for you to trade at this point, considering he has a bottle and you don't. Go back. Click your hero. He gets a deny. So you're kind of struggling in the laning phase. And you're not doing poorly by this point, right? Like, if we look at your last hits compared to Shadow Fiend's, 350 in, you're doing fine. All that really happened is you're not, like, as efficient as you could be with your movements. You're not contesting every last hit that you could be, right? And you gave away a free wave of experience and farm to go pick up a regen rune for 200 HP. So, like, those are kind of like your big mistakes, I would say. But like, all things considered, 4 minutes in, you're like relatively even to this 4.7k mid, right? It's really just that one wave that's kind of making a difference. And that's pretty good. Like, you should be happy with yourself. I think your item build could be a lot, I think your skill build could be a lot different, and that would help you. Here you take a lot of damage. I don't know why that was. Were you trying to get aggressive? Yeah, you were probably trying to get aggressive. So this is kind of the weakness, I guess, of Invoker. And I think it was actually a pretty good time to get aggressive. So here, you click here, and he commits himself for the raise. Cold snap him right here in the middle of his raise. Right? And then this is a perfect time to be aggressive, because what he's going to try to do is he's going to wait for his raise animation to go through, and you'll probably get 2 or 3 red clicks off on him. But what ends up happening is you click and you hit him, but you don't end up cold snapping. And then you kind of misclick because you're like spamming clicking after to try and continue clicking him. When you're clicking an enemy hero to right click them, just click them once, you know, or once in a while. Like it's kind of like an illusion of having high actions per minute. But what ends up happening is if you end up spam clicking like this instead of just clicking once, and he moves out of vision, you're going to actually lose control of your hero because your hero's just going to run up this way. And so I think what happened is you just lost control of your hero. And then because of that, he ends up getting a ton of harass off on you, and now you're like in a really bad situation because you got to be sitting on Quas under your tower while he takes the rune. Whereas that was like a pretty good time for you to be aggressive. So I think you read the situation right, but you're just kind of making a couple mistakes here. This is something also that I see happen very often, is when the wave gets split like this, you're standing far enough away that you're actually missing experience from these 2 creeps. It's about a screen, so about this is your experience range right here, and you're a little bit out of range. Like you miss the experience on that range creep. And you know, last hits aside, like last hitting is important, but especially on a hero like Invoker, experience. And this is something like if you just stand here, maybe you don't get both. Maybe you don't get both last hits. You probably only get one, but at least you're getting experience from both. Now, the other thing to be worried about is because Shadow Fiend went for a rune, and you have vision of this rune, and this isn't something you checked, but if he picks up a rune like Haste, he's going to dive you, especially at your low HP pool. So just check, right? It's really all you're checking for is Haste or Invis. And if you see one of those 2 runes get picked up, then you know you got to play a little bit more defensively. The other way you can do that is you can just play defensively and like wait until he shows in lane and shows you what his build is, or what it is in his bottle, but it's a little slower. You missed a last tip there. Again, pulled yourself out of range from range creep. So in total, in the first 4 minutes and 38 seconds, you've missed about 5 creeps worth of experience, I think. It's 2 range creeps, and then the 2 melee creeps you went for runes, and I don't even know, are you going to miss this siege creep too? Was there a siege creep there? No, there wasn't a siege creep there. And that's just kind of like a big no-no, I think, in lane. Now, Midas is a very common item on Invoker, and I think it's good. Like, Midas is definitely very, very good. But what you're feeling right now in this game is you're having trouble standing up to the Shadow Fiend in lane. And what I would like to see you do is I'd like to see you itemize to help you stand up to the Shadow Fiend in lane. And the ways you do that are, 1, buying yourself regen so you can sit on Exhort longer. That's one, right? The second is you can actually upgrade your boots. You can get like a... if you want to start spamming Forge Spirits, for example, you can get like a Ring of Basilius, for example. It builds into a Yule's for later. You can finish your Phase Boots, which gives you a little bit more damage and that little bit of extra movement speed, so you can position a little bit better. Like, you can build these kind of like littler items that help you win the lane harder and then go back for Midas if you're farming really well. And I think a lot of Invokers will rush the Midas, so to speak, in lanes that they shouldn't necessarily. Like, Shadow Fiend is looking to dominate you right now, especially if you delay your item progression. Whereas Shadow Fiend, on the other hand, is not delaying his item progression. He's going in Aquila, he's getting extra damage. Like, look how hard he hits relative to you right now. And a lot of it is just kind of, one, you're not sitting on Exhort, which is a big, big deal, because you're missing out on, you know, 6 damage per orb. You're missing out on 18 damage not sitting on Exhort, which is part of what's making the difference. But you have 800 gold right now that you're not spending, whereas he's spending all of his gold, and so he's becoming stronger in lane, and you're basically staying the same strength. And I think like right now you could pretty much complete a phase boots, and then you're basically even with this guy in terms of damage. And then you can fight him almost, like you could try to kill him with phase boots very easily, especially if he doesn't have phase boots and you got someone who rotates in, drop a cold snap on him, do a lot of damage. Like you've got to create pressure through your item builds rather than trying to win the lane by rushing Midas. And I think that, you know, when you're in a position where you're secure in winning your lane, then you can go back for the Midas if you want to. But I think it's too early at this point, especially when you feel like you're struggling. Here you get a nice cold snap, he just walks away. Then he right clicks you in the back. So that's okay. So you chose to be aggressive, and this is kind of like a weird time to be aggressive, right? You got to pick your spots for aggression at good times. And the reason I say that is it's weird, is that like here maybe it's okay to get it, but what's happening right now is he has 3 creeps and you only have, let's say, 2 because this guy's about to die. So he actually has creep advantage against you, and if you right click him at this point, you're going to tank 3 creeps, especially because you're standing closer to them. They're just going to start hitting you immediately, whereas he's standing really far away, and if he right clicks you, for example, it's going to take a while for these creeps to walk over and start hitting him. So when you're trading in the middle lane, you've got to consider creep advantage as times to be aggressive. And if you had a support rotating in, like if Witch Doctor or Windrunner was like sneaking in from the backside, then maybe you just go, because the advantage of 2 heroes versus 1 is stronger. But at this point, I would disagree with playing aggressive at this point. It looked okay before he raised this wave, but after he raised this wave, I don't think it's the right play. See how these creeps are doing so much damage to you? Like, he didn't even hit you in that point, and you lost 50 HP. Right? And maybe you got some good damage off on him, but he ends up fighting back. He kills your Forge Spirit, and then he hits you in the back. And so this trade is marginal at best, especially considering he's got a full bottle. So what's going to happen? He's going to bottle up, and then you're going to be forced to sit on Quas again because you want to regen your HP. Right? This is just it's an old way of thinking with Invoker that doesn't apply anymore. Send out regen for yourself. So we'll keep going. So here you hit him for free. That was a good harass though. He ends up denying. And that's like not a last hit you can contest, considering his base damage versus yours. Mostly because of your item progression. And so now you're starting to feel like he's bullying the lane. He's standing very aggressively, such that if you walk into range for a last hit, he's just going to hit you, kind of thing. And so I can feel why you kind of got dumpstered in lane, because I can see it in your play. And then this is what's going to happen a lot of the times in the Invoker versus SF matchup, is SF's just going to push the wave every single time he comes up with raises. And then he's going to go get the rune. And one way to deal with that is to send Forge Spirits to deny runes, which it looks like you're doing, so that's good. Looks like somebody else grabbed it. You end up missing 2 of these last hits down here. You're also tanking your creeps quite a bit. You can use Forge Spirits to tank them. Granted, you use your Forge Spirit to try to deny a rune. So, like, that's part of how you can avoid taking that much damage and staying on Exhort. Like, Quas is a great resource for Invoker in the middle lane. But the problem with Quas is that people rely on it too much, and because the hero is, I'll say, weak in this patch, he can't afford to abuse it as much as he did in the past. Alright, you just eat 2 raises here. So, you can't see him TPing. I can, because it's the, because of the replay bug, I guess. Let's switch fog. Switch fog to the Radiant. Maybe we'll see it. If you're kind of looking elsewhere, you're paying attention to other things. But what you've got to be thinking is, you know, Invoker's a 600 range hero. 600 range. Why are you standing this close to the creep wave? You know, it can only end poorly for you. See, we can't see it. We can hear it because of the replay. But, like, standing this close to the wave is only asking for trouble. You know, you should be positioned up here. right? Now, two of their heroes are showing bottom. It's Io and Undying. And then top, you've got Slark showing. So that means Skywrath's unaccounted for right now. Like, because you're standing here and you're not standing up on your hill and last hitting from range, this Skywrath could wrap around and kill you, right? And it's likely Shadow Fiend's going to come back, right? He just went for the rune, and then he came back. Kind of thing. He was farming bottom, maybe he ran back to base. Who knows? He's eventually going to come back to lane. And he can actually just walk up to you right here and short range raise you, and then you're in trouble because you can't run. If you try to run versus a Shadow Fiend like that, you're going to have a lot of trouble. You maybe could with Cold Snap and by putting a Force Spirit on him and like interrupting his raises at the right time, but this is just positioning. Like, there's nothing you could do to see him there, so stand in a position such that that kind of thing can't happen, right? When you're in the river, you're dead. When you're on your hill, you're safe. Those are like the two basic principles of where to stand in the middle lane. And granted, like, you're losing this lane, but you're not losing it terribly, all things considered. I think you're just kind of falling behind because your item build is, you're going for a bit of a greedier item build in a lane that you're losing, and I would much rather see you itemize to help yourself in a lane that you're losing. And then here you TP back into lane. But the kill really changes the dynamic of the lane in that you lose about 200 gold. You also give a bunch of experience to Shadow Fiend, who's now sitting almost on level 9. He's about a 2-level advantage ahead of you. And like, you can win games even though you lose your lane, but when you lose your lane and then you feed deaths, that's like a surefire way to lose a game in a lot of ways, especially in the mid lane. And it's a lot of pressure. And honestly, like, I didn't start playing a lot of mid until about a year ago because I felt that pressure and I didn't want to lose the game for my team. And what you're going to realize is that you're going to lose a lot of games for your team. You're going to suck it up mid. You're going to get destroyed by some better players at times, and that's going to happen. But almost those games that you lose, you almost learn the most from. Here you kind of mess up tower aggro, you end up missing a last click, or right click. Here Shadow Fiend's in a bad position, like I would have cold snapped him there. Right, you have creep advantage on this fight. So summon your Forge Spirit right here. Switch to invoke you're already on the right orbs. So invoke Cold Snap right here, Cold Snap. He's going to eat 4 creeps worth of damage. He's going to have you and a Forge Spirit hitting him. He's not going to be able to raise you. Missed opportunity for aggression there. Here he raises out the wave, and then he goes back and jungles. So because the rune's not spawning, you use your Forge Spirit to tank. Like, you're tanking with your hero when you could be tanking with your Forge Spirit. They even have a lane ward on you, which makes it really hard for you. I do like this. I didn't say anything about this in the previous one. But stacking both camps at once, it's really good by you. I think you're too late for this one. But that's really good. I think that shows a lot of good understanding. And it looks like you've elected to go for a Forge Spirit heavy build by going the Quas and the Exhort. This is just the QE build. This is like a pretty old school build, and I think this build really relies around pushing. Like, that's kind of the strength. You get 2 Forge Spirits up early and then you push the wave. And I think that's okay. It's pretty good in this game in that your team is pretty early game oriented and you might want to be pushing down towers, and so maybe that's what you're thinking with this item build or with this skill build. But you're not making nearly as much use of Forge Spirits. Forge Spirits are essentially free. You can cast them on cooldown, basically, without losing your mana pool, and you've just been sitting at full mana for most of this game. Like, have Forge Spirit up almost all the time. The way Forge Spirit works is that Exhort actually increases the duration, and so this is another reason to send yourself out regen. So you can put more points in Exhort. Here you walk for the rune. You probably should have died, but it looks like Shadow Fiend missed his raise. He's got a Shadow Blade, so, you know, like, looks like Windrunner ends up living, so that's good. But right now, like if we look at your net worth, so 10 minutes in the game, we'll pause it. We'll take a look and see what's happening around the map. So Witch Doctor's died quite a bit, especially early on. That's really, really bad for you. So it looks like you're losing your safe lane. Although Bristleback has 2 kills, so maybe it's going okay. It really depends on like kind of the nature of these kills, but you're way behind in kills. Windrunner, who looks like she was off lane, is 0-1, but she's level 6. She's getting levels, not necessarily doing that great, not doing that poorly necessarily, but their team looks scary, right? They've got a level 10 Shadow Fiend who's 3-0. They've got level 8 Undying who's 4-2. Skywrath's level 4, so he's probably the weak point of their team, and then Io's also level 4, so their supports are a little bit underleveled, but then again, so are yours. Your support levels are about even in terms of Phoenix and Witch Doctor. And then they've got a level 8 Slark who's 1-0. So like the game looks really, really scary at this point. And some of that's because you were struggling in your lane. But if we look at your net worth, right, you have 2,800 net worth, but you're sinking half of that into a recipe right now. So you're effectively a 1,500 net worth hero. Like you're as valuable almost as like your Witch Doctor or your Io, just because you're not making use of your item set. Yeah, and like a 10-minute Midas is okay, or an 11-minute Midas is an okay timing on Invoker. Here's Slark dives. I think you meant to cold snap him and you just Sunstriked instead. You get a really nice counter gank here, and I think that really helps you because it allows you to finish your Midas, which means you can start getting value from it. Then we just lasted some creeps. This is like the lane tax, right? Like you show up to a lane, you get a kill. So you know, I get a wave or 2 of farm and experience. That's just kind of the cost of ganking your lane. So I'm okay with that. My friends aren't usually too happy when I show up and I'm like, I ganked your lane tax. And it's like, well, you've been here for like 2 minutes. It's too long a lane tax. So Skywrath's here getting aggressive. You do a lot of nice damage. You probably should have invoked Sunstrike and gone for the kill there. Like, I think you could have killed him if you Sunstriked him. Take a look. Like, he's running in a straight line, I would guess there, maybe. Maybe he comes back because your team is fighting. Should also switch the fog. But I think it would have been worth trying to get it. And so you've purchased this Midas, right? You purchased it nearly a minute ago and you haven't been able to use it. You know, sometimes, like, ideally you want to use it on the biggest creeps, so the level 5 creeps in the jungle. That's the ideal situation because you get the most experience from it. But sometimes when you just get it, you just got to use it. And I don't know if you had an opportunity in that time because you were fighting. Here, Slark's pushing mid. You have a glyph still if you want to use it. Okay, no glyph. And it looks like now you're going for a Yules. Again, that's kind of like, this is like the same mistake from earlier that got you killed, right? But you don't end up getting punished here. So, you don't know what's on top of this hill. You know Shadow Fiend's down bottom, but currently there's no hero showing. Slark is there, obviously. You know Slark is there. So Slark could be sitting on top of this hill. But you walk directly into the creep wave. And what you should be doing is you should be hanging back with your hero. You should be sending your Forge Spirits to the opposite side of the hill so that you can see what's going on. And then you can move in with your hero. Granted, it looks like you want to push mid because you've got 3 heroes here and it's unlikely for them to go on you. But then again, 4 heroes are missing. And they've been missing for, 25 seconds, so to speak. So they all theoretically could be there. Like Undying, Skywrath, and Wisp could all be right here, and then they drop a tombstone on you, and you are just dead by positioning. Whereas if you had been planning accordingly, like you always play like there's somebody there that you can't see kind of thing. And I'll even go back. I'm going to put this on 2x speed just to see what like the map looked like beforehand. Because all you're seeing is you're seeing Slark in the mid lane, you're seeing SF, so we're seeing a couple of these guys bottom, but they haven't shown yet. Okay, so they all showed bottom. So I guess you're okay. That positioning is okay, just based on the state of the map. But it's just something to think about. We saw them bottom, so it's not a big deal. I spend most of my games staring at the minimap. So here you put your Forge Spirits back behind. You're kind of neglecting them. You put him on the Skywrath, which is good. Drop a Cold Snap on him, he's dead. Switch for the Courier. That works. You end up walking in with your hero, and Shadow Fiend just kind of 2-clicks you. So this fight kind of happens in a way that you're expecting, right? Based on what the map looked like beforehand, right? They all just push down bottom. So what that means is when this Skywrath TP's in, and you put your Forge Spirits on him, you can see them all start flooding in from the bottom. And the fastest heroes get there first, kind of thing, like the Slark and the Undying. And then Shadow Fiend shows up, and then Wish shows up. And so while it looks like a good fight, it's very clear that all of their movement is geared this direction. And so you take kills where you can, and you kind of position yourself such that the retreating option is is a good option. What you ended up doing is you ended up running into the center of the fight. Rather than kind of hanging at the back, you could have picked off the Courier, you could have picked off the Skywrath, and then you could have retreated into your jungle and you would have been fine. Granted, you want to help your team, but you've got to help your team in situations that actually benefit you. These guys are diving, giving away kills, so that's good for you guys. And the next item you're going for is Yules. And Yules is a good item on Exhort Invoker, but it's not actually that good of an item on the Forge Spirit Exhort Invoker. Because the point of building Yules on the Forge, on Invoker, and this is usually the Wexort style, where you get Wex and you almost just max Exhort and kind of ignore Quas, is that you can blow people up with the Sunstrike Yules Deafening Blast combo. And the strength of the build that you went, which is by putting more points in Quas, is that you can have Forge Spirits, 2 Forge Spirits up at all times. And most of the time when Invokers go this kind of build, they tend to go more disably or more pushy kind of items. So they tend to go, it's really common what's his name? Hani, the old mid player for Fnatic. When he used to do this build, he used to go Treads with a Basilius, and then he would build into an Orchid, and then he'd go Blink. So that's one way to build it. You can also go Necrobook, which would be pretty good this game, especially considering Shadow Fiend went a Shadow Blade, and then Slark is likely to also go Shadow Blade, so then that gives you some sort of detection outside of carrying dusts and sentries everywhere. The biggest reason not to go Yules against... This was a good fight for you guys. This sentry did a lot of work. I don't know who ended up buying that, but that sentry was huge. The reason not to go Yules is that if you look at your damage, and this is something that if you look at the spells, because all the spells have these ridiculous bars for every single level of Exhort, every single level of Quas, and you don't have to memorize this exactly, but unless you've put all of your points into Exhort most of the time, you're not actually going to have enough damage to burst down a hero with the Yules Sunstrike Meteor Deafening Blast combo, unless you've put more skill points into that area. So you guys are mid, you're looking to get aggressive on an Undying. Hard to do. But Shadow Fiend shows up in the lane, you get a nice Shackle Shot as well as Cold Snap. Tomb doesn't end up being enough to save him, though he does pick off your Witch Doctor before anything happens. Good fight for you guys. So whoever bought that sentry, big kudos. Here you resummon your Forge Spirits. So one thing about just Forge Spirit control in general, and this is just a tip for microing, you're tending to just run around with all of your units together. Spread them out individually, right? You can still control them as a unit, but what's happening is you're getting a lot of stacking between you and your units, and now you're controlling them independently. But move this spirit, just click this spirit and move it here, for example. Spread them out and then control them together. That's fine. You could have killed that Skywrath, I think, if you just kept clicking him. This is a situation where you can get a kill on Skywrath if you just understand spell cooldowns, because it's unlikely that Undying has Tombstone, right? He used Tombstone 35 seconds ago. So all this Undying can do is decay and soul rip. So this kill, you're scared of Undying dropping a tomb, and you want to back because you've taken this objective, but this kill is just free if you hit him. Like, you could have easily gotten 2 right clicks and then maybe the power shot finishes him off. It was a nice soul rip by Undying to sort of save him. But play around spell cooldowns a little bit more. And here, just try for the Sunstrike. Nice. So you get a nice kill there because you follow up with the Sunstrike. You probably didn't have to do that. Shadow Fiend's a dope, walks into the same spot he just died to a sentry on. And tries to cast his ulti. You end up backing out. That's an okay trade. Kind of give up Phoenix. Maybe Phoenix could have gotten away. But you're doing okay. Like, you're starting to recover. Granted, Shadow Fiend's net worth is extremely high, but there's more to the game than having one extremely farmed hero is still counterable in Dota, especially with the way that items work. Here you kind of misclick Sunstrike, I think. This is tricky because they just get really aggressive on you and run in and drop everything. I'm surprised you didn't die there. Shadow Fiend just like walked up and started right-clicking you. You might have died. But they were focused on something else. So what's happening this game, right? Let's talk about what's happening this game. This game is the other team is sensing weakness in your lineup, and so they are pushing aggressively into your team. And they're grouped up as 5. They're trying to make something happen. And this is kind of a thing that happens a lot of the time in lower MMR games, is where you just kind of like sit and fight and fight and fight and fight. And you have to decide whether or not these fights are something that you want to be taking. Here they bring Shadow Fiend back with Wisp. You guys chase really far out of the base. You get a nice kill with your Forged Spirits. And your Invis. You almost pop your Invis, Undying uses Dust. And you are dead. So you've got to be deciding if these fights are things that you actually want to be doing or if you'd rather be doing something else. Like, one of the greatest strengths about Double Forge Spirit Invoker is that he pushes like a maniac. And maybe you're just scared to push because of the Shadow Blades. But in this fight, for example, you like win the fight, you defend your tier 2, and then you just continue chasing and chasing and chasing, and then the whole fight ends up happening here. Way, way outside of your pace at basically a positional disadvantage for you guys. And like your team, for example, maybe you guys are geared to fight early, and maybe you guys think you're stronger and you want to fight. But given their farm, maybe you think they're stronger. And in that situation, you've got to start deferring your plans as to how to beat them. And I think 5-manning directly into a team that's stronger than you is just a surefire way to lose a game, because you're just going to lose team fights over and over, and the disadvantage is only going to grow wider and wider. So what I'd like to see you doing, especially as Invoker, is go up to this top lane and start pushing, right? Create pressure on the map that isn't, we're sitting behind our tower waiting for you guys to push, and hopefully you make a mistake and dive and we'll win the game that way, right? Like, you're hoping for a mistake rather than trying to win this game right now. And it's mostly just through your movements. Granted, you're scared, right? There's a lot of Shadow Blades. Just buy yourself sentries. Go push. Go push this tower with sentries, you know? Again, you get a nice defense here. So kill the tomb, and then just retreat. And if they dive, you can punish. So they continue going. You don't have Invoke up, unfortunately. Nice soul rip. So bunch of fighting, nothing ends up happening. But you've essentially defended your tower because Tombstone was used, Slark used his ultimate. All spells are on cooldown, so they're unlikely to continue pushing. Maybe they just keep going. But their fight is significantly weaker, just as like your fight is significantly weaker. Nice kill there. Do you see what I mean? It's just constant struggle. We're going to sit behind our tower, they're going to push our tower. And what pressure are we creating elsewhere on the map, right? You want to punish teams who make this kind of a decision, and they're struggling to push. You know? Does Bristleback need to be there? Probably. Do you need to be there? Maybe. Right? You're probably the best split pusher on your team. Because there's Bristleback who can stand up front, you got Windrunner who can help to defend the push, Witch Doctor is a support, so it's really hard for him to split push, but though he can. Phoenix can also split push, but not very well. So these heroes, like, they're not really integral to the defense of the tower, but you should definitely, like, make use of your teleport scroll. And so now we'll look at your Meteor, for example. Your Meteor, right now, contact damage does 130, and then burn damage per second, which is, I think it burns for 3 seconds. So that's another 60 damage, or 90 damage, essentially. You've got enough points in Exhort now, maybe that Yule's is okay, but I don't know, I think I much rather would have seen a different build out of you. Like, I think Necro 3 would have been good this game, but I also would have liked to have seen you finish your Shreds earlier, or finish Phase Boots, then go into like a Basilius, to help spam out your Forged Spirits more on cooldown. And then I think from there I would have probably gone like a Necro book. Witch Doctor gets picked off by Slark. And not much you can do. You end up TVing back to base, probably scared of Slark, which is understandable. Next item you're considering is Ags. Ags is pretty good on Invoker now, especially because it gives 1 level of each orb. So it's okay. It's better than it used to be. It was definitely trash beforehand. And I think this, like, Ags on Invoker in general is kind of an item you want to get if you're ahead, because it doesn't add that much functionality to your hero. It basically just gives you 3 levels worth of experience. And what the problem I'm seeing right now is not that you're missing spells, because you are hitting quite a lot of spells, and you've hit a couple of Meteors and some nice Meteors in fights, but you don't have enough utility to beat these guys. You get a nice combo, doesn't do enough damage. They end up relocating out. Tomb's down, so you kill the tomb. You also only have 1 point in Invoke. So you've kind of gone this Yule's build, and the reason you have enough points of an Exhort is because you only have 1 point in Invoke. But like right here, for example, this point in Invoke ends up hurting you a lot. Because most of the time, like, one of the best ways to counter IO, especially when he's relocating back in, is to just drop an Ice Wall on the location. And you didn't actually have the cooldown on Invoke. This spell, you can level it up at 2, 7, and 12. So this could be a level 3 Invoke right now. And you would basically give up 2 points in Exhort for it. Which means your build would be fine, right? You'd still be a Forge Spirit build. I just, like, skipping Invoke is really hard to justify because the cooldown goes down so much. Like right now it's a 22-second cooldown. It's basically your 3 spells in a fight. Whereas at 12 seconds, maybe you get a 4th out. It's really tough to say. You guys end up getting a kill on the IO here. Good self-fuels when Slark goes on you. And you're winning these fights. Like, you're massively behind, I would say, for this game. And now that you've, like, these kind of fights have happened and they've made this mistake, you can start to feel yourself clawing back into this game. I think you also could have blasted that Skywrath with your Deafening Blast and gotten a kill. But we'll take a look at the state of the game. So Shadow Fiend and Slark are both really scary, especially with their Shadow Blades. But you're doing okay, right? Like, that fight was a huge swing. probably swung you back into the game. Yeah, like the difference in net worth isn't actually that much in terms of team net worth, but it's a huge difference in terms of the cores. Right? Shadow Fiend is this big, strong hero. Slark is pretty strong as well. But you guys, what you've given up in giving one player an extremely high advantage, you guys have in net worth on everyone. Right? Your positions 3 through 6 in terms of net worth. Only Witch Doctor on your team is really struggling. But it's basically these two big guys that are the issue, as well as Tombstone during fights. Though Tombstone has been dropped at usually inopportune times, and you've been able to clean it up nicely. But moving forward into the game, your goal is going to be to try to limit these two from getting kills. And the way you do that, especially versus two Shadow Blades, is vision control. And I think, you know, at this stage of the game, it can be really hard to do that, especially when your support is really struggling and not necessarily has enough gold. You know, he's carrying sentries, he's got arcane boots. He's really poor, especially because he's been struggling quite a bit. And a lot of times in these games, I might just help out my support and buy a couple of sentries or carry dust or carry items like that that allow me to really help my team, especially if we're planning on team fighting. Or I could pick up those sentries and then split push a bit myself. You know, vision is a huge component of this game. It's tricky to split push as well versus IO now, so maybe like split pushing wasn't the route to go, because you could just get relocated on top of by someone. But that's where like a blink would be helpful, because if you see a relocate, you can blink out. Blink's like the item that counters Wisp a lot of the times and allows you to split push in situations that we wouldn't be able to. And that's why you see a lot of Tinies still go Blink. Winona misses the shackle here. Slark opens up on Witch Doctor, and Witch Doctor's just dead. Right, but it's not surprising that this Shadow Fiend has this whole team behind him. Right, because they've been doing this for 15 minutes, you know, 12 minutes, 13 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever. They've been doing this for the majority of the game, and you're not creating any pressure elsewhere, so there's no reason for them to split up, right? Like, they think they're winning most of the fights, or they're strong enough to win most of the fights. So there's no reason for them to split up from that perspective. And then you're not creating pressure elsewhere on the map, so there's no reason for them to split up in terms of that perspective. And you know, that's pretty much why all you're seeing is these 5-man team fights. They end up getting a huge kill here, and again, this is the second time that this has happened, where, you know, you're defending your tower, but you end up chasing so far out that the fight ends up happening outside of your tower. Right? This fight ends up happening basically out here. So again, positionally disadvantage for your team. And even these like tier 2s, defending these tier 2s is usually positionally disadvantage. Here you walk out and right click, you're not using any of your spells. Chase a Wisp really far out when you know Shadow Fiend's there. You just end up dying. Like, I understand you want to get kills, but you take what they give you when you're behind, and you don't try to make... Like, you're trying to force it too hard. Shadow Fiend tries to solo kill a Sun. It's pretty funny. Slark sneaks in the back and kills the rest of your team. Part of the reasons that tier 2s are positionally disadvantaged is this hill, right? This choke point is a major issue when you're trying to defend, because it kind of forces you into this small little area, and if they have some sort of combo or some sort of AoE stun kind of thing, it can be really hard to defend these towers. So most of the time you just end up kind of giving tier 2s if you don't feel like you're strong enough, and then you try to trade for other objectives on the map. The item you're going for is Ags. Ags is okay, like I said. More of a like when I'm ahead kind of item when I purchase this. Like, I think your boots should be upgraded. You know, like, you're leaving them unupgraded because you want to get boots of travel later, but you've essentially had brown boots for 30 minutes. And upgraded boots could make a big difference. throughout the game. Like, it's one of the most cost-efficient upgrades in the game. Like, Arcane Boots give you tons of mana, big mana pool, a little bit of extra movement speed. You know, the stats on treads is like one of the best values you can get for stats. You get +9 stats of any stat, and you can switch them around, do tread swapping, and that kind of thing. And Phase Boots is 24 damage, and you even get like an extra 6 damage on top of the recipe, which is massive move speed for 3-second burst, or I think it's like 2.4 now. It's not a full 3 seconds. But we'll see. Like, your Invoker plays okay, but you're just playing very scared, and you're kind of just letting them do whatever they want with the map, and then again hoping for mistakes in team fights. Here, a good way to defend the high ground, especially against a team that's pushing, and I'm surprised they haven't taken the Aegis, is to drop an ice wall. So drop an ice wall here, and then it forces them to walk through the ice wall, and it's just kind of a nice way to stall that first push. But big fight ends up happening, and they just dive past your tower. And there's not much you can do at this point, right? You end up killing the tomb. Tomb's in a bad position, but you lose a tower for it. Good tornado. You kind of mess up your combo, so you miss your meteor on the Undying. And you end up losing bottom Rex. Yeah, it's really hard in a lot of ways, because when you're behind, you have to start taking risks. And trying to team fight a team, especially with an Undying and with a Wisp like this, and Shadow Fiend, like these 3 heroes especially are really good team fighting heroes. Undying especially, like the way you beat Undying most of the times is you make it so that Undying can't do anything for the first 25 minutes, because you're splitting, you're farming, and then you're big enough that the tomb almost doesn't even matter in the late game. Here you end up getting a nice kill. Nope, good relocate by Wisp. Self-fuels. He switched targets, so he probably didn't even need the self-fuels. Although he might have switched targets because of the Yules. But it's just a bunch of diving at this point. I think overall this game, like, there are a lot of things you did pretty well. Like, your team actually defended a lot of those pushes and did pretty well, and actually clawed back into this game. Like, this game it feels like you're very far behind, but you're only behind in net worth by about 2.5k throughout the game. And so I think you guys did a lot better than this game feels like. This game feels like a stomp in terms of the kills, and to some extent it is. But I think this game was very winnable for you for a long, long time. Things I want you to work on, especially in the laning phase, is paying extra special attention to your positioning and your micro movements with the hero. Like, rewatch laning phases and laning phases where you have trouble, or just laning phases where you do well even, and watch how good your positioning is as you're doing it on like half speed or a quarter speed, those kinds of things. Other things to work on, I think for you it's going to be about item choices, and to some extent like builds on Invoker. Like, I like Invoker. I think this hero is really fun to play, and he is weaker nowadays, so there's no like one build that's great. It's not like Slardar where you just kind of like build treads in a blink and you're happy and that's all you need. This hero is very much where the item choice can determine how well you do in a game. And I think this game, like, you want to blow people up with that combo, and if you were really far ahead, then maybe you could transition into Yules and do the more Wexort kind of thing. But I think if you're not setting yourself up to do that early on, then it's not going to work, because you bought this Yules to do that combo, and you never got that combo off on anyone. Granted, it did help you a couple of times defensively, and maybe you purchased it for that reason, but most of the time you purchase it to be aggressive on Invoker. And I think a different item build might have suited you better, especially in the laning phase. One last thing to work on, just like take a big picture look at the game and see how you win, what's our win condition, what we can do. Like their mentality was very clear from about 15 minutes, and then for the next 15 minutes they basically just 5-manned and they pushed down all your towers, and that's all they did. And when you can classify that mentality, then you can think up how I could counter it, and then that forces your mentality to start thinking towards these are things I should be doing, these are the things I should be stressing, this is how we're going to try and win this game or pull it back. That's it from me. If you have any questions, go ahead and shoot me a message or type a comment in the video. Other than that, I hope it was helpful. And that's it. If you're looking to get a replay reviewed by me, shoot me a message on Reddit. That's probably the best. I have a link to a replay review thread below, and that should be it. So thanks for watching.